Welcome to the Playbook presented by the Leaders Lab. I'm Ken Eslick, and if you're a leader or founder who wants to hire top talent, scale your business, and sell for more, you're in the right place. Each week, Onika Kwatsha and I bring you practical, actionable advice that you can put to work immediately to make an impact in your business today. And now, here's this week's episode. Welcome back to the Playbook presented by the Leaders Lab. I'm Ken Eslick, once again here with Onika Kwatsha. Today, we're starting where every great leadership journey really begins, not with a strategy, not with hiring or scaling, but with you. This is the foundation before we even start to work on the pillars, and it's an ongoing process, so we're going to come back to it over and over again. Leadership isn't a title, it's a mirror. It reflects your values, your motivations, and what you believe about people and purpose. Some of us lead because we love building people up, some because we see a vision bigger than ourselves. And sometimes, if we're honest, leadership finds us before we're ready, and we have to decide what kind of leader we want to be. So if you're listening, think about this. Why do you lead? What do you love about it? What challenges you? Until you're clear on your values, strengths, blind spots, and your why, it's hard to build a team, scale a company, or even think about selling one someday. This episode is about starting there, understanding who you are as a leader, because the choices you make from that place ripple through your team, your company, and your legacy. So let's open up the playbook and talk about you, the leader. Once again, I'm here with Onika Kwatsha. Onika, welcome back.
Hi, Ken. I am very excited to be here and starting at the foundation of any great company, the leader themselves. So looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too. Episode 1 was a lot of fun. I'm ready to dive in and lay it on me. I know you've got some questions once again.
I do indeed. I do indeed. It's actually funny, Ken, as you were speaking, something really spoke to me and stood out to me from what you were talking about now. And it was the part where you mentioned leadership as a mirror that really hit. So let's start there. When you think of leadership, how do you personally define it? I mean, because you've had leadership in different contexts, corporate, the military. How would you define leadership?
I think a true leader for me is somebody that has a high degree or high need for the human need of contribution. And we'll talk about the human needs maybe in a different episode, or you can go back to our first podcast, the Leaders Lab podcast, and there's a whole episode I think on 6 human needs that I did with Rich Waterman. But 6 human needs, I'll go through them real quick. There's a need for certainty. There's a need for uncertainty. There's a need for love and connection. There's a need for significance. And then there's 2 needs of kind of our spirit or our soul, which is growth and contribution. We all have all 6 of these human needs, but the order in which we prioritize the needs have a lot to do with how we act and how we show up in the world. If a leader values significance as number 1 and contribution as number 6, I think we can already get a picture of like what kind of leader that's going to be, right? A lot about themselves, a lot about looking good, not a lot about contributing or caring to the greater good, more than likely, if that's how they do them. And don't get me wrong, significance is an important need. They're all important, and again, we all have them all, but it's sort of like a recipe. So I think what we're asking is like, what's the right recipe, maybe, excuse me, for a leader? And
Mhm.
so to me, somebody that values contribution very high, somebody that values love and connection. I know love sounds a little strong for the workplace, right? But connection, love and connection come from the same place, right? It's genuinely wanting to connect with people and be there for them. And so I'd say it starts there. When we look at, I think I was talking to you once before about, look at like sports as an example, because I think everybody can relate. You've got those athletes, just natural born athletes, or maybe they even worked on their skill set along with their God-given gifts, but they get really, really good. Their stat lines are always solid, but they don't necessarily make people around them better. They just sort of get theirs. You know, you even hear people talk about that, like, hey, I got mine. Like, look at my stat line. It's like, yeah, but your team lost, right? Like, who cares? A great leader, and again, staying with the athletic theme, would be somebody that shows up on the field selfless, somebody that shows up not so much concerned with their individual stats, though they know that that will come over time, but how can they serve the team today to be
Mhm.
better? Sometimes that means dishing off a pass instead of scoring, right? It's so there's really a degree, I think, of selflessness around it. And
Mhm.
that's really how I would divide it. And there needs to be a passion for genuinely getting excited for other people's success.
Yeah. I find that so interesting, Ken. So I'm a leader and I am trying to figure out and self-reflect on which of those human needs would be driving my leadership style. How would you advise me to start that process?
You can if you just want to look at it very analytically, you can go online and type in 6 human needs tests and the word free. There's like a free test you can take. It takes maybe 10 minutes. One thing I will tell anybody is when you're taking assessments, any kind of assessment, disc profile, Enneagram, or this, human needs. When I first took mine, I can tell you that my number one, I think, was significance. My number two was certainty. I did
Mhm.
care about people. I did care about people, but I spent my days thinking a lot about how I looked and was I sort of getting paid the right way and stuff like that. Right. And so it was an eye opener for me when I took it. I wouldn't have called myself a bad leader at all, but I would say at that point I was a little misaligned in how, at least in how I was internalizing things. Now I did a good job training people, I did a good job developing people and all of that. But was I doing it for the right reasons? Was I doing it for their outcome, or was I doing it because it looked good to develop people? Do you know what I mean? In the positions I
Yeah.
was in. So again, it's kind of like a recipe, right? It's where do these land for you, and they can change over time. The other part of it is, again, looking at any assessment, is scoring low in an area doesn't mean you can't be good in that area. It means you've got to have radical self-awareness around that area so that you can kind of structure your time and your actions, and maybe even hire people in to help you fill that gap. So
Mhm.
a low score on a piece of paper doesn't mean anything about how you actually execute day to day. It's just an indicator to you of where you might have a blind spot.
Yeah. Awesome, Ken. I love that. I really do. And as you were speaking, something also came to mind to me very early on in my leadership journey. A question that I had for myself and a debate that I often see online is the difference between being a boss and being a leader, the difference
Mhm.
between management and leadership. I'd love to hear your take on, is there a difference? What is the difference?
To me, there really is, and if I use I know we're talking semantics sometimes, so we'll call someone like I'm sure I've called you our marketing manager before instead of our
Mhm.
marketing leader or marketing director. The word manager behind something to me indicates process, indicates administrative, right? It's just kind of how it speaks to me. The word leader is something totally different, right? And no matter what you put that title behind, we could take a job that some people think is a relatively clerical job, like accounts receivable, and you could say I'm an
Mhm.
accounts receivable manager. Well, to me, I get one picture on that. The picture I get is that you're managing this process of collecting money for the company. You
Mhm.
might have a person or two reporting to you, but to me, it sounds like a process oriented title, accounts receivable manager. Accounts receivable leader still indicates to me some of the same foundational things that have to get done, collecting money, right? Maybe managing, but they're a leader. So to me, just the word leader being in that title indicates that there's something proactive that they do. There's something that, like they're coming up with ideas, new processes, motivating a team maybe around this. Maybe they've got incentives even tied to how well their team performs, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a totally different, it changes the context. And so one of the exercises that I've gone through many times for myself and for leaders that report to me is first take a look, like in your position of leadership, what are your payoff activities? Meaning, we all are going to have a certain amount of management, admin things that we have to do, period. Right. We can't really get away from that. But our ability to minimize that and spend our time on the payoff activities. So let's take a sales director or sales VP at a company. Let's say they have directors reporting to them, sales managers under them, reps in front of them. Well, we can make a short list real quickly of what are the things that are real payoff activities for that sales VP? Hiring and developing people, that's huge. So anything around hiring and developing people would be a leadership activity. Even interviews is a leadership activity because you're painting the vision to someone potentially that could come in and have a 20 or 30-year career with your company, right? So that's huge. Training is huge. Meeting with your people in a non-administrative capacity, but where you can motivate, gain alignment, paint the vision, all leadership.
Mhm.
Non-leadership would be reports that you just have to do as part of the job, checking the box type items. I think for any of us, whether you own a company and you're listening to this, you manage a team and you work for another company, your ability to lean into your leadership activities and to clearly define that and to clearly define leadership versus management and even
Mhm.
color code your calendar so you can get a visual and just go, hey, this week was a good week. 60% of my blocks were pure leadership activities. Like that's a really good kind of test to put yourself through and then a really good habit to form moving forward.
Yeah. And something that I got from that is you actually need both elements and both
You
aspects.
do.
It's just about at different times they might control and balance in a different way. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders overlook. Maybe they're too that much of the people facing sometimes and too much of the management
I
sometimes.
would
And the
take it a
balance.
step. I would take it a step further
Mm.
and say that there's people who lean into management to avoid leadership.
Oh,
Yeah, they just do. They don't even know they're doing it. It's not like they woke up and go, "Well, I don't want to have this conversation, so I'll go
mm,
ahead and shuffle some business cards or realign the pay plans behind the scenes or whatever they're doing administratively." But they're just doing it because if you're not paying attention, then your brain takes over. Our brains are not wired for fulfillment or outcome. They're wired to keep us safe. And so if we have an aversion, let's say I got to have a conversation with you, Annika, that's like a tough conversation, let's say stuff, and I don't really want to have that conversation, right? It's not going to be fun. Maybe it's necessary. It's vital. It actually is kind to you to let you know what's expected and where you stand,
yeah.
but it's not going to be the most pleasant thing ever. And so I create ways, my brain will create ways if I don't guide it to avoid that, right? And there's always stuff we can do. So at the end of the day, you tell yourself like, well, okay, I didn't have the conversation, but boy, I was really busy though, right? People talk about that all the time. I was really busy. Who cares if
Mhm.
you're busy? Nobody, you don't get a medal for that. We're all busy. We can all find stuff for ourselves to do, but we've got to be really guided and really focused, I think, in how we spend our time between those two blocks. And you really do
Mhm.
want to minimize. The question I'd be asking myself is, what's the minimum amount of time that I need to spend on management activities? That's it. To still be effective. You still want to be effective. You don't want to drop balls, but
Mhm.
all of your 1 hour management blocks you should be looking at and going, can I get these down to 30 minutes? Can I get the 30-minute ones down to 15 so that I can free up that time to do things that are proactive in my role, which again, easy to define if you just sit down and really think about it.
Yeah. And Ken, something I've often heard you talk about is this concept of burning your calendar. I'd love to know from your take, what's your approach to the time management aspect of balancing this management versus leadership? I know we've spoken about things like time blocking, being specific with outcomes, but I just want to hear how you approach it.
I'm a nut with this, and we might take this a step further. Like, we might do a whole episode on this because I think it's so important. But if you don't plan your week, if you're not running your week will run you. Period. That's just the way it happens, right? For anybody listening to this, anybody in leadership, anybody that owns a company, there are always fires to put out. There are always things coming out of left field. There are always things on your to-do list. And again, if we're not guiding our brains in advance, our brain just goes to the thing it wants to do at the time. It doesn't make it the most important thing to do at the time or the most urgent thing to do at the time. We'll just do the thing that's kind of comfortable in the moment. Right. So if I'm a business owner and I know that my time, a certain amount of my time needs to be blocked for business development, but let's say that's not an area that I love, my brain will look for other things on my task list just to replace that block unless I, again, I'm very guided about this happens at this time. So I would say everybody should always have a calendar that you're running off of, always. That calendar should be set up weekly, and some of your recurring tasks can even go out further, right? They can go out, if I have a team meeting every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, then boom, that just repeats every Monday, right?
Mhm.
Um, but in going back to these management leadership versus management activities, I can look at all of them once I have them kind of segmented and then how much time needs to be allocated to each, and then start building my calendar with those blocks, right? What I would include in my own calendar, or I do include in my own calendar, are also things that are important to me personally. So getting to the gym, spending time with family, making sure that my workday is done at a certain time, right? So I blend the whole thing kind of together. But from a work standpoint, again, really understanding, I'll tell you a quick analogy. One time, I was asked to be the chief operating officer of a large kind of mastermind. We had over 300 members. I was a
Mhm.
member in that and kind of a coach. And they said, "Hey, do you want to just run this whole thing?" And
Mhm.
I really wanted to do it. So I just said yes on the spot. Well, we had our first recruiting business still at the time. I didn't magically have an extra 20, 30 hours to like run this company. So I had to really start thinking about, and I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't doing the most efficient job at what I'm talking about right now, leading into that. I had a
Mhm.
calendar, but it was a little sloppy. I wasn't super detailed with it, but I had to find some time. So as I sat down with my list of what is administrative and what is leadership, and then
Mhm.
even on the leadership stuff, I'd go, well, how much time do I need I remember specifically talking about business development activities. It was
Yeah.
like, well, I need 15 hours a week, 5 days a week. I need 3 hours a day. I need 15 hours. And the reality is, when I really went, well, what am I going to do with 3 hour blocks every day? Because that's the other thing about these big fat blocks on your calendar is if you don't have a specific goal for these blocks, and the bigger they are, the harder it is to have a really defined goal, then again, our brains just take over. We just have to just keep telling ourselves, if I leave it up to my brain, I'm in trouble. I have to guide myself. 3 hour block. And I go, well, when have I ever actually done a 3 hour block? If I'm honest with myself. And I'm like, I never do 3 hour blocks. And I'm like, what can I get done in 1 hour? And when I say 1 hour, I mean no distractions though, right? Like face of the phone down on my desk, notifications turned off,
Mhm.
already done everything. You got to use the restroom, you go use it. Like, you got to fill up your water cup, you go fill it up. 1 hour, I'm not moving. My butt stays in the chair. Let's go. What can I get done in 1 hour? And when I really started thinking about that, I'm like, I can accomplish everything if I'm that focused that I thought I was supposed to get done in a 3 hour block, which I'm never doing anyway. Right. I can get all that done in 1 hour. And I started going through different parts of my calendar like that and really finding out, like, with really, really, really focused time, what can I get done? Now, if you're getting queasy or squirmish around this calendar idea, because a lot of people do, a lot of people equate their calendar to a lack of flexibility, right? I think it's just the opposite. I think it's when you're not guided, when you're not, if you think about it, on a weekend when I don't have to do the activity, I'm really good about telling myself what I need to do on Wednesday because I don't have to do it right now, right? I'm just like, this is what I have to do in 3 or 4 days. In the moment, if I leave it up to myself, again, I know I keep repeating this, but my brain will just take me to wherever, whatever's easiest, right? It's almost like, I'm going to keep using sports because everyone I think can relate on some level. It's almost like going, you know what? We're just going to show up and play the game this week without watching any film, having any plays, or having anything because we just want to be free to enjoy the game. And it's like you end up getting beat like 8-0, right? Because you had no plan going in. Now, there's massive flexibility. Let's keep it with sports. Let's say they watched all the film, they designed all the plays, they did everything they could do to prepare for that game, and they go into halftime and they're down 2-0. Then what do you do at halftime? You recalibrate and you change the plan a little bit based on what life conditions are throwing at you. And that's the same thing with a calendar. So my calendar is always blocked for the week, and it always changes every week because situations change. But I
Mhm.
go into every week and every day with a specific plan around that. Now, when you mentioned in the question burning the calendars, after a while, I find that things just aren't landing the same way as they were before. Maybe working out in the morning was great for me for a while, but then I started having a lot of early morning meetings, and now my workouts were sometimes getting sacrificed, and maybe I was pushing them out.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, it just doesn't feel congruent anymore. I'll just light the whole thing on fire, burn it. And I say it that way intentionally because it's not adjust it, it's not tweak it. It's let's just burn it down and start over again because there's something empowering about setting up your time and your schedule around your vision and your team, around your leadership versus management, that when you get done with it, you're like, ooh, like this is a good plan, right? Like if you don't feel excited about it, you should work on it until you do. But that's the idea around burning them down every now and then.
Yeah, I really like this concept, Ken. I think it's the difference between being in the passenger side and the driver's side of your own day to day, basically,
Totally.
or in business. So,
Totally. I
it,
mean, the words I think of, Onika, are you can either be proactive or you'll be reactive, right? It's one or the other. Yeah. So either I go in going, and I hear so many business owners say, like, well, I don't have time for this and that because my team this or this comes at me from here or this customer from here, and I'm like, it's all just bad planning. I'm not saying things don't come up, right? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that every day goes the way I think it's going to go. I'm just saying I have a plan, stuff happens, we adjust, we move stuff around. If a block was on there because it was critical that that block be on there, let's say
Yeah,
it's business development, let's say it's meeting with you or someone else on our team, I may have to move that meeting. I mean, you know that. You see my updated invites all the time, but I don't cancel it. If it was important enough to be on there, then it just gets moved, right? And so we play a little bit of Tetris with these calendars, but so the idea is there's extreme flexibility, but extreme structure to begin with before we get to the flexibility.
absolutely. And Ken, before we can even, as a leader, think of things like this, I think it's also so important to identify the why. Why are you in this position? Why are you a leader? Why are you a founder? And you've met and coached thousands of leaders yourself. Why do you think people choose to lead in the first place?
Again, it comes back to that first section we were on. How did, not so much how did you get into it, but what resonated with you? And I think there's a couple of things that I think have to be aligned to be the most effective leader that you can be. One is
Mhm.
that need for genuine contribution, wanting to help people. We talked about that earlier. The other is having a vision that is maybe bigger than other people can see at the moment, that you
Yeah,
can help them understand and then lead them towards. So I think if you're coming in with a strong sense of contribution and vision, those are the two that are absolute keys. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Most leaders don't build organizations, they build cages, and you can't grow if everything depends on you. Whether you're a founder scaling your company or a corporate leader running a high performance team, growth starts with people. And that's why the first pillar at the Leaders Lab is building the right team. Before you scale, before you sell, before any big initiative, you need the right leaders around you. Our team has placed over 1,000 executives into Fortune 500 and fast growing startups and supported over 75 acquisitions along the way, helping leaders create over $1 billion in enterprise value. At the Leaders Lab, we help you hire top talent, scale with confidence, and build a business or team that can thrive without you. Take the free Scale Up scorecard at theleaderslab.co or email me directly, Ken at theleaderslab.co, to find out how ready your organization really is for growth. And now back to the playbook.
yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Ken.
Sure.
That was the generic why do people lead? I want to know, why do you lead?
Oh, what do
What's
I
your,
lead personally? I
yeah.
would say a couple of reasons. I feel like it's a bit of a calling, in a way, to where, and I'm not, I hope that doesn't sound egotistical. I don't mean it that way. I mean that it's a when I say a calling, I mean a need to serve other people. Um, I can follow really well. I started my career following. We talked about that last week. I followed in the military. Like no matter how high up you go in a corporation that's big, you're still reporting to people.
Oh,
So I can definitely do both. but I've always felt this need that, hey, I think I can make it better. You know what I mean? I think I have ideas here. And if someone else has ideas, great. Like, let's get those ideas from them. And if someone has a toolkit that's different than mine that might be better leadership for this team, that's okay too. I can be a leader like within a team, right? It doesn't have to be like the person at the masthead of the company or whatever. But I think for me, there's just this genuine need to want to make people better and create environments for them to be able to succeed. I mean, the best part of what we do here at the Leaders Lab I'm just talking internally, Onika, is the growth of people like you. Like, that's the most fulfilling part of my job. And of course, we love growing the company. And if it's doing well financially, we love the benefits from that. But if you're doing it only for that, you'll never be able to sustain a team and grow a team long term. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, Ken. It all starts there before it can go outwards as well.
Totally. And there's a happy sort of obligation. I'm saying happy obligation because there's obligations or responsibilities that we have that weigh on us, right? That feel like burdens. And so but this is a happy one of look, people have come to us and given themselves to us. They've given us their time, they've given us their hearts, and we owe it to them. And again, I mean that in a positive way. It's a positive sort of responsibility to say we owe it to them to grow the company and create this environment so that people that want to do well and have the skill set to do well are able to do well long term. I think that has to exist, that we have to want to. It's not a one-way street, right? And it's not with, I'll be honest with you, it's not with every single person that walks in the door, other than, hey, we're going to give every person that walks in the door an opportunity. They won't all take it. But for those that take it, we have a responsibility, I think, to make sure to the best of our ability that they've got the ability to grow and prosper.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that responsibility can also tie into probably some of the biggest challenges leaders face on a day-to-day basis. What would you say has been one of the most challenging parts of leadership for you?
We talked about this really briefly last week, but I'll drop back in here because I think it's really important. And we actually had a couple people follow up with me on LinkedIn and say, "Ooh, that topic, I'm dealing with it like right now." And
Yeah.
um, this idea that, because if you think about it, again, being repetitive intentionally here, if a leader, if you're with me on this idea that a true leader has to have a strong sense of contribution and a strong
Mhm.
sense of connection, then it goes against the grain when we get somebody that shows up on our team that we are, I think, creating an environment for or with for them to be successful, and they're not taking advantage of the opportunity. And we get in this thing where, but it's my fault, because I'm supposed to be creating this environment and I'm supposed to be, and it's one of the toughest things because I had a boss that told me once, turnover is always the boss's fault. This has just stuck with me. I mean, he probably told me this 20 something years ago. It's just stuck with me because he said turnover is always, the word always to me is just like always, and I'm like,
Yeah. In bold.
always, yeah, the boss's fault. And I'm like, I remember arguing on that statement, but what if someone steals from you? What if someone does this and that? And he said, we either hired wrong or we developed wrong or we led wrong. Like, it's just one of those things. That's it. So if someone's stealing from you, you hired wrong. Like, you didn't do enough in the interview process to figure out, their character and who they were. And maybe you didn't do background checks or something. I mean, I know that's a pretty extreme example. So I take that like very, very seriously, but not to the point where I won't act on it. I think for a lot of leaders, the idea of letting someone go is an admission of failure in a way, because if turnover is always the boss's fault and I've got to own that maybe we didn't make the best hire right here, then that's a very tough thing to go through. And to me, when someone's not going to be with your company long term, all the time you spend after that, you're not serving them, you're not serving yourself, you're definitely not serving the rest of your team. Sometimes when we think we're being nice, because we let something, just give it more time. And don't get me wrong, we should absolutely give people every opportunity to succeed and all of the tools to succeed, and enough time to execute on those, and proper feedback in between about how they're doing, based on the progress that's needed to get good. But if you've done all those things, then there's a really good chance you could have hired a great person for the wrong position. If there's not another place to put them, then you've got to move on. And so I think one of the toughest things is just realizing that no matter how good you think you are as a leader, it is not your job to make everyone good. Like you can't, none of us have that power or that capability. And when you
Yeah.
think about it, it's kind of egotistical to think that we can. Like, I know it's coming from a good place, but the idea of like, I can make everyone great.
Yeah.
I bet I've
Yeah.
said something like that early in my career. Like, everyone on my team's going to succeed. And it's like, I'm going to do my best to set an environment where everyone on my team can succeed. It's up to them as to whether they will succeed or not, you know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of leaders listening have felt that exact feeling, that mix of like purpose, responsibility, pressure. Where do I fall in and how do I make it happen and how do I make it work? And Ken, one of the best things that I've had in my career is just being able to learn from you and your leadership process. What would you say is one of the biggest blind spots that you've had throughout your leadership journey and how you've worked on unlearning that over the years?
I, let's go back to these assessments real quick. And I remember the first time that I took something like a whole brain disc kind of assessment or whatever. It rated me ridiculously high on the D scale. So out of like 100. So D on a disc profile would be for drive, like making decisions, that kind of thing. So like, let's say a 99 on the D scale out of 100 or something like that.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's contrasting scores, meaning, if you do really well on D, there's a really good chance on a disc profile that your S might suffer a bit because you're focused on like making decisions and driving things forward and stuff like that. S, which is support, team, kind of harmony, that kind of stuff, might sacrifice in the process, right? Because it's like, no, we just
Yeah.
got to get stuff done. And I remember, and once again, being young and naive, like arguing with the test results, which doesn't seem to work, right? They, they're not like a real person. But my S was like really low on the disc, right? Still is, by the way. And so this idea of, a lot of times I think what we do, Annika, is we lean into our strengths,
Mhm.
which we should. I mean, nothing wrong with that. Lean into it. It's a God-given gift, whatever that is for you, right? If you're decisive and you have drive and that makes stuff happen, then amazing, right? But leaning into our strengths does not mean putting up blinders on our weaknesses. And so for me, I think early on, Annika, was, and I'd like to think that I was still like an approachable leader and a decent person to work with, but I definitely didn't put like people first. I mean, it was results. You know what I mean? It was all results. It was like, just get the result, because it was so driven that way.
Yeah.
Now, having awareness over your blind spots. So going, okay, look, a person with this profile, not just me, any person, high D, high I, low S, moderate C on a disc. If I read someone else's disc profile and said, what would some of the great outcomes be of that? And then what would some of the challenges be? I'd say, well, the great outcomes are going to be, they're going to get stuff done. They can probably sell, they can pitch a vision. They're going to get stuff done. Okay. What
Mhm.
would the problem be? Well, the problem is they might leave some folks in their wake. They might be a bit like a bull in a china shop and all of that. And I think the earlier version of me, to answer your question, was, who cares? Like, we're getting stuff done. This is how
Uh-huh.
I'm wired. A lot of people do that. Like, this is how I'm wired. They'll sort of protect it. It's like, well, this is
Mhm.
how I'm wired. It doesn't mean it's always the best thing for everybody, right? And so maybe what I need to do is, I can't naturally just make my S score go up, but what I can do is pay attention to the shortcomings, that low S, how they manifest in a day-to-day basis, and how
Mhm.
can I lean into that, create systems around that. I'm not the guy that's going to remember everybody's birthday. I'm just not. But can I have someone that populates that into my calendar so I make sure to say happy birthday, because that's important to people if it's their birthday, that you acknowledge it, right? And it's not like I'm trying to be mean. It's just not where my brain naturally goes. Whereas someone with a high S is going to make sure to tell everybody happy birthday before they even get their stuff done at work. You know what I mean? So So it's not right or wrong. I think it's just about being aware of your blind spot, which leads me to this other part that I don't know if we'll get to today or not. So I want to make sure I mention it.
Mhm.
Is I think one of the best, absolute best traits you can have, not just as a leader, but as a human, is radical self awareness. Radical self awareness, but especially as a leader. So if you're missing that as a leader, you're gonna have some challenges, for sure. And so, how do you get self awareness? Well, you have good relationships with the people around you, and you're talking to them. You do these assessments to recognize where you're coming up, not coming up short, but could come up short, right?
Yeah.
But I think radical self awareness, and I like the word radical because I mean over the top. Like I
Yeah.
under an understanding of who you are, who you aren't, how you're showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And coupled with that, Ken, I'd say also surrounding yourself with the right people in mentorship relationships, peer relationships. And I think another thing leaders often overlook is that you can grow from the people that you're even leading.
Of
If,
course.
yeah.
It does.
So,
I learn from you guys all the time, Monica. And I'll take again a spot on the team, and you know this, but I'll just go, you're just better in this area than I am. So give me some ideas, or you head up this part of our business. And that's where I think founders really, especially as they're making some of their earlier key hires, the
mhm,
founder that got the company off the ground, got it scaled to 7 million bucks through, hard work and hustle and grit and all of that,
yeah,
has to be able to say, I think a lot of us just want to be like, no, I can do it. I can do it all, but we can't do it all. If you were the founder and maybe you're more of an inventor type, maybe you're more introverted, then maybe that first big hire is a chief revenue officer and bringing them in, right? Your hard work and again, and everything, it got you to where you are, but it's not going to get you to where you want to go. And so I think that radical self-awareness allows us to hire. It's really funny, Annika. I think a lot of us, when we hire people, we, if we're not thinking about it, we connect with people that are most like ourselves. That's who we
yeah,
connect with. Which
yeah,
means if we're interviewing 10 people and we're not practicing radical self-awareness, we'll go, how did the interviews go? And you go, well, I really like so and 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 so are just going to be the people that mirrored you. They're not necessarily solving a problem on your team.
mhm,
What we should really be looking for is who are those personality and those people. And so not just doing it in practice, Annika, like you're talking about, but literally
mhm.
hiring for it. Like, where am I short and who can I hire to fill those gaps?
Yeah. Well, Ken, what you just mentioned really is so amazing because once we start hiring basically people who mirror us, we have this groupthink situation going on. There's no diversity in ideas, there's no diversity in how we manage the business, there's no strengths and weaknesses that differ. We're
Right.
just this copy paste
Right.
identical people. And what are the dangers, Ken, by the way, around that sort of thing?
That can lead to a lot of things. I mean, the obvious, right? So, lack of diversification in people and personality types leads to a lack of diversification in ideas. And a lack of diversification in ideas starts leading to just run the playbook, right? Like here's how we do it. We do it this way every time, and we're just cranking things out. And there's a time and a place for that. Like sometimes we all just got to march and be soldiers for a bit, right? But long term, that's just like not good for any business. I remember at one point, I early in my career took the leaders that were reporting to me. This is not a good reflection of me, but it was more of a early practice of radical self awareness. This is back when we were still using overhead slides. I don't know if you remember those from like school. I don't know why schools are always the last to get technology when they should be the first, but
Yeah.
I did it intentionally. This was after no one was using transparencies anymore. I wanted transparencies to prove a point because I took these overhead transparencies and I took test scores from an exam, kind of like the disc. I don't remember if it was that exact assessment, but what I noticed when I tested out, it was like 10 general managers that we had at the time in one part of the US, that we weren't practicing at that point this idea of, I don't want to say diversification because it wasn't like we weren't trying to be diverse. It's just we weren't proactively doing anything about it. And so when I looked at, and I'm not just talking about the race, gender, and all of that. I'm talking about the way they thought,
Yeah.
right? More, which was equally, if not more important, the way they were wired. And what I noticed was they were all high D. They all had a decent I. And so I took the transparencies to prove a point of
Mm.
why we needed to like bring in some different thought leaders like into our group. You know what I mean? Because we had created this team that was doing well, but not thinking outside the box at all because we were all in the same box, you know?
Oh, that's that's such a good
Yeah.
like way of thinking it. But if you want to put it in a like visual sense, like everyone's sitting in this box and there's all these opportunities, but no one's thinking of jumping out of the box because we're all
Totally.
same box, you know?
Well, and I think sometimes you stumble into these things like by accident. You know, it wasn't like I went in advance, like, oh, I'm going to test everybody out. And then I already know what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to do that. It was more like I'm getting test scores and I'm like, well, this one looks like this one. And this one looks like this one. And then I started going, they all look the same. That's a problem, right? So we need to do something about that.
Yeah. And that's something founders and leaders in general need to be on the lookout for. Very
Totally.
active and
Totally.
proactive about not for.
Totally. Because if you think of an organization, let's say an organization has 500 people, and let's just use the example I was giving of the 10 general managers who are all wired the same way. And let's say they're all high, let's say they're all wired like me, high D, low S.
Mhm.
Um, so we get stuff done, hard charging to a frontline employee within anywhere in that organization. What that might feel like is a lack of empathy,
Mhm.
perform or leave kind of mentality, like right away, right? You know, nothing wrong with incentive based environments, don't get me wrong, but if it's too dog eat dog, or like if you don't get
Yeah.
your numbers, we're not going to support you, then you could just feel like a number, and if I don't produce, I'm gone, and that could lead to higher turnover and all the other stuff that goes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken, as you were speaking there, I was kind of thinking of the fact that we've worked with a range from startup leaders, Fortune 500, for someone who's just stepping into leadership, maybe got promoted, just started their own business. What's the first question they should ask themselves before even starting with their first hire, before starting with the business plan? What should they be asking themselves first?
Who am I and what am I trying to build? And so the who am I question, again, use some help, get some assessments done, figure out kind of how you're wired, because that's going to give you a much better idea. People go in and build their business plans, Annika, without ever asking that question, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. You know, it's like, I'll do this, then I'll do this, then we'll hire this person, then we'll scale to this level, then we'll build out this team. And it's like, okay, I mean, cool, like that might work, but like unless you really have assessed and know who you are and decide how you're going to hire to fill those gaps, it's really interesting. You know, if you're building a company, the last thing, the only thing that you can't really delegate is your leadership, your personal leadership. You can still delegate leadership within the team,
Yeah.
and vision is just going to fall on you if you're the founder, and you should want that. You should want to own that, but everything else can be delegated over time. And so as you're figuring out what to delegate or how to build a company or how to build a team, again, I would start with, where are my strengths? You know, my
Mhm.
God-given kind of the way I'm wired strengths, and where are my weaknesses? Start hiring into my weaknesses, eventually start developing people into my strengths so we can multiply there, and eventually kind of work my way out all the way back into vision. And if all you spent your time on vision and being a key person of influence for your company, that would be huge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And so that's kind of looking at a leader that's starting out. So for those that have been leading for years, what role do you think knowing your why plays into things like culture and growth in your company and even one day, how you exit?
If you can't define your why, then you can't define a vision. If you can't define a vision, then what are you leading people towards? And if
Yeah.
you're not leading people towards something, then they're just working for a paycheck. And if they're just working for a paycheck, then they'll just do the minimum they need to do. You're right. It's like this whole ripple effect that goes, on and on. And vision's kind of like the calendar. Your vision at times is going to be refined and updated and energized and tweaked and adjusted for like what's going on in the world, right? So if the vision has gotten stale to some point, put some juice into it, rework it, get help from your team. But you've got to have your why you're doing it, and the vision has to be strong enough to pull people towards it. right? Pulling meaning they want to gravitate towards it. You don't have to push them towards it. They get it. And when you're talking with individuals, it's aligning them so that their why aligns with the company vision. When you have that combination of things, magic can literally happen. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I kind of had this like picture and an image of how it all really starts at the top. And
Yeah,
that why that you come with, that's exactly what influences the culture and the team culture and the individual culture within any organization. So that why really is the focal point and the starting point for literally everything.
totally.
Yeah, absolutely everything. And Ken, thank you so much for speaking to me today.
Yeah.
I want to put you on the spot and try and ask you, if you were to try and put your leadership philosophy and summarize it into 2 sentences, 2 or 3 sentences, how would you concisely sum it up?
Know yourself,
Mhm.
understand your why,
Mhm.
genuinely care about people, and create environments that lead them to a greater outcome. That's it. And the last thing, I'm going to quote Tony Robbins here, but great leaders see things for how they are. Okay. This is step one. There's a 2-step thing here. Actually, it's a 3-step thing. So, step one is seeing things for how they are. So, under seeing things for how they are, that is seeing yourself, understanding yourself, also seeing your market conditions, where the business is, where the cash flow is, just seeing it like it is, right? Good or bad. So, a lot of people, if something's bad, they don't even want to pay attention to it, right? They're like, let's just not talk about that right now. It's like, no, see it for how it is. And then a great leader, to just simplify the whole vision and the why and the outcome, sees it being better than it is, right?
Mhm.
Sees a vision that other people aren't maybe seeing right now today because we're just in how it is today. So a great leader sees it better and then ultimately can guide people to the better, can pull people
Mhm.
towards the vision or create an environment that does that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it,
Cool.
folks. Some golden nuggets from the leadership playbook with Ken Eslick.
Thanks so much, Onika. I was worried we'd have a half an hour of material. It looked like we probably went 45 minutes today. So that's amazing. And guys, we'll see you next week on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
That's it for this episode of The Playbook by the Leaders Lab. Thanks for spending some time with us. We'd love it if you would subscribe, share the show, and leave a quick rating and review. Your feedback helps us grow and it helps more leaders and founders join the conversation. If you'd like to talk more about hiring, scaling, or selling your business, please email me, ken@theleaderslab.co, or connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll be back soon with more strategies you can put to work today. I'm Ken Eslick with Onika Kwatsha. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week in The Playbook.